Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I'm going to share with you about the books that I read in November. Kind of. Because I'll also be sharing the books that I didn't read and that I started to read and then stopped reading, and it's going to get complicated, but hopefully you'll be able to follow along. So if you saw one of my previous videos, I recently released a video talking about how I'm going to do the Read What You Own challenge, and that my goal for that challenge is to read 30,000 pages before I buy any new books. And there's caveats and exceptions and all that jazz. So go watch that video if you want to know all about that. But the reason I bring it up now is because I'm going to do a countdown to when I have finished reading 30,000 pages. And that's largely going to come into play in my what I'm reading, currently reading videos, as well as my monthly wrap-up videos. So I'm going to go ahead and put a counter somewhere up here, wherever it's going to show up best is basically how it's going to work out, starting with the 30,000 pages, and I'm just going to let that count down as we go. So let's just go ahead and get started because there's a lot that happened this month and I want to talk about it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the books that I am either DNFing or unhauling, and I'll talk a little bit about why for each of them. So the first book is the private writings of the Saint of Calcutta. Is that what it is? Of the Saint of Calcutta. Yeah. Can you tell that I didn't read this book? So I picked this out earlier during the month, and I thought I was going to read this book, and I got into the introduction of it, where the editor and commentator, Brian Kolodiejchuk, sorry if I pronounced your last name incorrectly, starts talking about just a little background of St. Teresa. The vast majority of this book is actually just her writings, but he does an introduction, and I wanted to read it because I wanted to understand why he decided to compile these letters together and that kind of thing. And right off in the introduction, he starts talking about her motivation for wanting to become a nun, her inspiration, whatever you want to call it, calling is what it would be commonly referred to as, her calling to become a sister, a religious sister, really, because she wasn't a cloistered nun, and do missionary work. And he used some of the terminology that she had, and right away I started having issues with the book. And I realized why I have picked this book up two other times and then have not finished it. And in short, it's basically just because I realized I have some unanswered questions and feelings and thoughts and emotions regarding missionary work. And I'm not really sure how I feel about missionary work, and I decided that it would be unfair for me to read this book and potentially have hard feelings about what she was doing and be rather judgmental while reading it if I didn't first decide how I felt about missionary work. I'm not saying that you need to decide that before you can read the book. That was just how I personally felt. And so I ended up deciding that since I'm not figuring out how I feel about missionary work anytime soon, like it's not a research project I'm planning on doing, um, I didn't want to read this book until I did that, and that's not happening anytime soon, and so neither is this book. That said, I've just decided that this book is being unhauled. This is 340 pages, so it's going to be 340 pages off of my total. I guess the numbers are going over here since the books are going over here. Next up, I have Adam Bede with this cutesy little lamb on the cover. I don't know why, I just think that picture is just so cute. You can see I started annotating this book, and like Middlemarch, I got a good 100 and almost 50 pages into this book before I DNF'd it. I've heard great things about George Eliot. I wanted to give her another try. I tried Adam Bede. I really liked the opening chapter of this book, and I was like, oh, I think I can do this. So the writing style in this, I would say, is different than what you find in Middlemarch. So if that was something that you didn't like in Middlemarch, you might want to give Adam Bede a try. I feel like her pacing is a bit off. I found like there were too many times where I was like, I'm not learning anything. Like, what is the point of this conversation? There were subtle things going on that were interesting. Not enough. It's not worth it. This is another DNF for me. No, no, and I'm done. I'm done with George Eliot. I'm I'm not reading anymore. I don't care if it's a different topic, a different person, a different writing style. I just don't want to read another 150 pages of her 500 some odd pages book and not have finished anything. So this book is 464 pages gone off my shelf. Along with that, I had another easy unhaul. Romola by George Eliot. Did I mention that I was done with George Eliot? No shame to anyone who likes George Eliot. Good for you. Not everyone or everything is for everyone. And she's just not for me. Romola is 583 pages gone. I'm not even going to talk about it. I did try reading a couple of pages, so don't be like, well, maybe I should have really tried it, because a lot of people who don't like Middlemarch do like Romola. No, I've tried reading chapter 1. I can't get through it. I don't like it. I don't care. The next book in my pile is The Last Samurai by Helen Dewitt. So The Last Samurai, I've picked up a couple of times and just haven't felt like reading it, or at least that's what I thought. It's very stream of consciousness. I don't know why, but it honestly felt like to me like she was typing out what she was thinking, which I thought was really different. And I don't know why I felt like typing on a typewriter, but that's just how I felt. I don't think she said that's what she was doing. I think what wasn't driving with me with this book is, one, I'm not a stream of consciousness person, and I don't think reading the first couple of pages you would have picked up that that's kind of the direction it's going in. It really took me a while to figure out what was going on, because the syntax started to become very interesting, where the ends of sentences were being dropped off and and her thoughts were being interrupted, because basically what's happening is her son keeps walking into the room, interrupting her while she's typing or writing or thinking or whatever, asking her questions about this TV show he's watching. And then I started to have PTSD back to like the early years of having a kid, where, yeah, you don't have a single complete thought because there's this little person who's always talking to you about whatever is going on with them. And so I was like, oh, yeah, wow, I remember that part. So in that sense, this book is really well written. It'll bring you right back to that moment. Like, I just didn't want to keep going with this book. I didn't go back to it. Like, basically what I did was I picked two books at the same time and started reading them in tandem, and figured that will help me figure out if I really want to read both of these books, because if they're holding my interest, I'll keep coming back to them. This ended up being the book that I didn't come back to at all. I finished the entire other book. And then when that was done, I thought, okay, well, I've already started this book. I'll come back to it. And then I was like, I don't want to. So that made me realize it was time to DNF this. So that's what I did. The Last Samurai is 484 pages. So that's coming off my page count and will be unhauled. In case you're losing track, that's 4 books that I have DNF'd and or just flat out decided to unhaul. I promise I did actually read something. Between Adam Bede and the like 50 some odd pages I read of The Last Samurai, that's 200 pages of reading right there. So that's the equivalent of a book that I actually read. Now that you've heard the sad story about everything I didn't read, let's get into the books that I actually read and finished in November. So first of all, for my family book club, we were reading the book Clotel. I have finished this book. This book is written by William Wells Brown and is about, well, I would say it's kind of about Clotel, who is supposed to be President Thomas Jefferson's daughter by a slave woman. And I would say, if you're expecting to go in this and hear a fictional recount of that as a story, you will be disappointed. What you really should know is that William Wells Brown kind of used that legend of a story as a jumping off point to talk about slavery, to talk specifically about the hypocrisy on so many levels that needed to exist in order to maintain a slave state and nation, really. He also talks about race in terms of the entire backgrounds of what at the time would have called mulattoes or quadroons, which were people who were of mixed race, from African descent, as well as whites who were usually their slave masters. Um, he talks about that whole social, cultural, political system that kept it in place. So it's a really, really fascinating book, on that level in terms of the different themes that he talks about. And then what I really was not expecting and really found fascinating and well done in this book was actually his use of documented facts. He uses a lot of actual, like, written, documented sources to give you information in this fictional style. And I think he's a genius at that. I think he so well includes as stories things that truly happen. And I understand why at the time period he would have needed to do that. As an escaped slave, writing during a time period where there was basically still slavery, I'm sure he could not just come out and say, guys, this is what's going on, right? And not have as larger readership. So I think it was very brilliant of him to recognize that a lot of what he's talking about might be slightly easier for people to digest if they were first introduced to it as fiction. But that said, he includes things from newspapers that were published at the time. He includes speeches from people who gave talks at the time, and all of it regarding slavery, all of it condemning it, all of it like addressing, he even has one character in the book who's just constantly addressing the stupid arguments that people would give about why slavery was okay, or why slavery wasn't so bad, or why these slave masters were really kind, and there are good ones, so if you just have good slave masters then maybe it's okay, or maybe the slaves learned useful skills. No, no, just no. Just stop saying that and read this book and get educated about what really happened. That's what I would say is the best part of this book. This was a 5-star read for me for that alone. So that said, I did finish Clotel. Sorry about my little soapbox in the middle of it. Well, sorry, not sorry. This story is 209 pages long. I really liked the Penguin edition. In my November TBR video, you probably saw this edition of the book. And I didn't end up sticking to this edition of the book because I wanted more of the notes. Another book that I read this month, this was actually the book I mentioned that with The Last Samurai, I had picked up 2 books at the same time, thinking I was going to read them in tandem and decide which one I liked better or whatever. The second book was No Name by Wilkie Collins. Guys, 5-star, love, 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 love. Hugged the book when I was done. Amazing. Like, I'm typically not going to go buy this book because you're going to love it, because people, the reading's subjective. People are going to have different opinions. Go buy this book. You're going to love it. Like, breaking all the rules here. I have read The Moonstone. In fact, I reread it earlier this year. No Name? Yeah, thus far, I think this might be my favorite Wilkie Collins book ever. I'll also add this. Charles Dickens said that he thought this was Wilkie Collins's best work to date. And at that date, Wilkie Collins had already written and published The Woman in White. So you don't have to take my word for it. What is this book about? I'm not going to tell you. Don't look it up. Be surprised. Wilkie Collins does mysteries. He does detective stories, all that kind of stuff. It will all be ruined. I'm telling you right now. If you read a description, if you read the back of the book, if you read an introduction of the book, or if you read the notes, don't do that. Do what the Victorians did and just pick up the book and read it. Okay? I can't even say enough. The book was great. I read the book back. I read some of the descriptions. Fortunately, they didn't contain any major spoilers. So I did know that it was a sensation novel, which if you don't know what a sensation novel is, and you feel like it's going to be a Jane Austen novel where nothing really bad's going to happen and maybe there's going to be a romance and happily ever after. And then something happens and it becomes a train wreck and it all goes downhill from there. And there may be a mystery. Likely people are going to die. Someone may get murdered, or 2 or 5. Things might go missing. Their entire social world is going to implode. And it's dramatic on a whole nother level. People are going to be passing out, getting sick, getting, maybe dying of illnesses. I just can't. Oh, I just love it. I love it. Some people think it's a little melodramatic. Well, then don't read it. If you don't like a little melodrama, if you don't like fainting people, it's the Victorian era. It's not going to be super strong on women's rights. He's not Thomas Hardy. He's not going there. You're going to have some stereotypical, like, Victorian women, and you're going to occasionally be like, really, Wilkie, is that how they think? Okay, this is definitely written by a man. By and large, if you can put those things aside, it's worth the read. It's worth the read. Read the book. Read this book. Okay, did I say how many pages that were in that book? I don't think I did. There's 608 pages. It was worth every single one of them. And there's little hearts at the end. This is great. This is great. Okay, the next book I read, and the last book that I finished, so yeah, I only finished 3 books this month, was Water for Elephants. And you're going to go, Wait a minute, Nicole. That book was not on your November TBR. No, it's not. And if you saw my December TBR, it was on my December TBR. Water for Elephants by Sara Gruen was on my December TBR and came off of it so I could take it with me on my trip. I'm glad I brought this book with me, but I'm also glad I went book shopping while I was there because this book took me a day to read. I woke up really early one morning because I couldn't fall back to sleep and read it on and off throughout the day, and I finished it before I went to bed. I personally don't think I'm a super fast reader, but I guess I'm fast enough that I read it. It was a pretty easy read. Like, this was not a difficult to me anyway. It's 331 pages. I did finish it. This was a 5-star prediction for me because it involves things that I typically like in reading. There was supposed to be a romance. I thought there was supposed to be some fantasy elements in it. It has a circus thing. It was okay. I liked the circus element. If you don't know, this book is a book about a young man named Jacob Jankowski. He is in the 1930s, and he, at the beginning of the book, is at Cornell University, which I was like, yay. I went to Cornell, also to be a vet like this guy. I didn't end up being a vet. But I thought that was a cool connection to have at the beginning of his story. And he is just going into exam week, and then there is a horrible tragedy that happens to him that totally derails his life. And no pun intended if you've read the book. And this book basically follows him over the next 3.5 to 4 months as he tries to navigate life post this tragedy. What I did find really interesting in this book is that Sara Gruen interweaves 2 timelines in his life. And the one is when he's 23 and he's going through all this stuff. And then the other timeline, which you get almost every other chapter, is when he's 93, so 70 years later. And he's reflecting / dreaming about what happened to him during this time period in his life. Um, so I found that really fascinating. I thought she did a really good job with that. I thought she bridged those 2 time periods really well. But there were just certain other aspects of the book that, like, I just thought were okay. They were, like, just average to me. So I thought the characterization was pretty good. I did think a couple of the, like, villain characters were a little one-dimensional. I think she was trying to make them more complex, but they honestly, to me, just felt like the bad guys that you just had excuses as to why they were the bad guys. I will say there's content warning in here for, like, some weird semi-graphic sexual situations that were more weird than anything to me, and I just felt like didn't need to be in the book. I also didn't like that she kind of went with the trope of, like, the the horny 23-year-old man, boy kind of thing. Honestly, it was at a level where I felt like he felt kind of more like a 16 to 18-year-old boy to me, and, like, fantasizing about women. And I don't tend to like that. I feel like that's kind of tropey and kind of falling into that stereotype that that's what all young men are like. So I think she just characterized him as being too young and too whatever for me. The romance was okay. It felt a little instant love to me, like a little insta love to me. I will say there is also some content warning for animal abuse in that way that you tend to get whenever people write or talk about the circus, and so that's never pleasant. I never like that, especially since I once wanted to be a vet. And then I also didn't like how the characters in the book handled it. But it was good enough for my plane ride back home. Kept me entertained, kept me reading all day. So, and I did finish the book, which this month is like a challenge in and of itself. So that's 331 pages down, Water for Elephants. I give it like a 3.5. Wow. So we're moving along. I'm going to have a lot of editing to do because this is not going to get long. This is long. So let me finish this up. I only have 3 more books to talk about. That's the end of the books that I read this month. Okay, so the last 2 books I have to talk about were both on my November TBR, but I did not get to. After I finished Adam Bede, I went and then read the first couple of pages, 10 pages, 20 pages of all the other books on my TBR pile. That did include reading the first 10 or so pages of both these books. But what I ended up deciding was, one, I wasn't really clear what was happening at the beginning of Little Big. The writing style was kind of weird, and I was like, don't know if I'm going to like that. So I decided that because I didn't want to go from one reading slump into another book that I could already tell I wasn't sure about the writing style, I did not choose this book. And then I just ran out of days and didn't get to it. With the way that we live now, I knew I didn't want to go from almost being in a reading slump to jump straight into a very long book. So I was like, I'll get to this after I finish Last Samurai and No Name and come back and try it again. Well, by the time I finished No Name and Clotel, I was like 4 days till the end of the month, and I was like, I'm not going to fit this book in. So I just decided not to even start it. So I'm still not sure what I'm doing with this book. I'm not ready to unhaul it, but I just don't know if I'm going to like the writing style. So what's actually going to happen with Little Big is it's going to go on my unhaul cart. So if you don't know what that is, that's basically a little reading cart that I have. I'd show it to you, but my my laptop is literally sitting on top of it right now. But you can go and watch the video. I'll put it in the cards above. You can go ahead and watch that video and learn about all the books that I'm thinking of unhauling, which this is going to be added to it. But I'm not ready to unhaul it yet, and that's why it's going there. So I'm just going to pop that down here and shake my camera. The Way We Live Now, I just ran out of time. I do still plan on reading this book. I just didn't want to shove it in at the end of the month, and or feel like I needed to carry it over to December. So what I've decided to do with this is just put it back on my bookshelf, because if you've watched my TBR video, either of them, you'll know that I don't do punishments. I think slogging through a book is punishment enough. So yeah, I don't do punishments with my TBR game. This is going back on the shelf. That's all you need to know. And it goes right here on this shelf, right next to Brittany. That, like, wow, can I pull that sometime soon somehow? The book that I am still currently reading that will be carrying over into December is The Tale of Genji. This was the reason I didn't want to carry over The Way We Live Now. I didn't want to carry over two huge books. So I have made some decent progress in The Tale of Genji this month, as well as the reader guide that goes with it, but they're going to still keep going. I am filming this video before the actual end of November. It is currently November 30th, so I have one day till December. So what I've decided to do to catch up on the Tale of Genji a bit is to just read the Tale of Genji until it's December 1st, and then I'll start on the rest of my December TBR pile. What's going on with the Tale of Genji? It's going really well, honestly. I'm still really enjoying it. I'm still finding the culture of that time period very fascinating to just read and learn about. And things are getting complicated with Genji and his wives, um, the numerous wives and daughters that are now wives of other people. It's complex family relationship at its height. And yeah, what else do I want to say about that? It's just getting interesting. Genji's much older in the book now. I think they're like just celebrating his 40th birthday. And so there's a lot that's coming into play with that, with his different wives. His wives are getting older, and so there's, all the complications with that. Things have shifted in court life a lot, and so he's now really high up there, basically at the level of a retired emperor, even though he was never emperor. And so you're seeing the dynamics and stuff that changes. Like, where does he have influence and power, and how is that impacting his life now versus the, commoner status and lesser influence and power he had earlier in life. So I'm really enjoying Genji. I really think I'm still on track to be able to finish it by the end of the year. I had to readjust my reading of it because of the trip that I went on, because I'm at the point where to finish it by the end of this year, I need to read 20 pages a day. And so falling behind 60 pages, even though it's not difficult to read and it moves along pretty quickly, like 20 pages of reading that a day for me is like about all I want to do. And then I'm ready to put the book down. And it has a very calming, like atmospheric, like, I don't know. I just feel like I need to light incense and stare out the window at snow along with them. I can't explain like the soothing feeling that I get when reading The Tale of Genji. But I share all of that because trying to read 20 pages of that at the end of the day makes me sleepy. Not because it's boring, but just because I find it very calming. Like, it's just very nice to listen to people like write poetry and stare at beautiful sunsets. The descriptions of the settings and scenes are beautiful and wonderful, but I can't do that too late at night. So I am still determined to finish that book by the end of the year, because I do now have planned a conversation with a friend of mine who, it turns out, not only has read the book, but has actually taught the book in her history class, and I really want to hear about that. Oh, I forgot. I should mention, I will be unhauling this book. It was good, but like I said, I only keep books that are 5-star reads, so this is going to go. this I will keep forever. Okay, that's really it. This video is 55 minutes long and it can't stay like that. So this is by no means everything I read, because we already talked about what I didn't read and that kind of stuff, but here's here's everything I attempted to read in the month of November. And there were some winners and losers in this pile. Oh gosh. Oh, okay. Bye.